If I tell you what I did yesterday, you do what? You take a bunch of sights, sounds, tastes, smells from your experience and stick them together in your head into a complex picture of my experience? Well, that's what I'm doing when I use my memory. I don't have a prefab image of what's happened to me in my life that I break down into pieces when I describe it to you. The act of remembering is building up from pieces, reconstructing reality from a mass of tiny sensations. And all a memory is a set of instructions for which ones to assemble and how. This act is performed every time a thing is remembered. And the difference between my memory and your imagination is that, having lived it, I have way more sense memories than I could ever communicate, and the knowledge that mine actually happened to me. Those are really the only differences. You could characterize memory as imagining things that actually happened, or imagination as remembering things that didn't. Okay, quickie sidebar on the meaning of meaning in this context. I don't want anyone to trip over this term and think I'm saying all art is part of some grand design, like I'm going to argue the Avengers as an allegory for the Bay of Pigs or something. I'm not using meaning in a lofty sense. If you want to argue that the only substance to the Avengers is it's fun, that's cool. That's still a meaning, but it's perfectly valid if that's all there is to it. I mean, that's not all there is to it. It's also about family, and about how being in a family with people who are different from you can make you a better person. It can teach you the value of selflessness, or the value of compassion over mercenary coldness, or the value of accepting yourself and your flaws, or help you fit your idealism into the modern world, or deliver exposition because Thor doesn't have an arc in this movie, but you see my point. All I mean by meaning is that there's an answer to the question, why does this exist? If someone made it, they had to have a reason. Anything from I wanted to change the world, to I wanted to make money, to I was bored. Those aren't all great answers, but they're answers. Also, all creators exist within their culture, which means their works are products of that culture, and their contents will either reflect or differ from that culture's values. Like the fact that all the central characters in the Avengers save one are white and all save one are men means something. We can debate the whats and wherefores of that meaning and how much that meaning matters, but since things like race, gender, the military, and New York City mean things to our society, they can't not mean things in our movies. And let's be honest, following the Avengers, Tony has PTSD from being a rescue worker during something very bad that happened in New York, and S.H.I.E.L.D. dramatically expands the surveillance state and employs Cap in fighting terrorist threats. So, while not the Bay of Pigs, the Battle of New York is doing work as a 9/11 allegory. Both these movies have been praised for exactly that. But let's follow through. In our 9/11 allegory, the US government could not have possibly predicted nor prevented the bad guys' invasion. America is wholly innocent and has had no political or social impact on the bad guys. The bad guys are literally inhuman, and any amount of violence against them is justified, up to and including the good guys nuking them. But whatever.
So you're saying she'll reach for something phallic on purpose.
My weapon. That's the ultimate, because she'll be taking my manhood and empowering herself with it.
Okay. A lot of psychoanalytic film writing comes from the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, including gender analysis of horror films, and it can read a little Freudian. Gender essentialist, heteronormative, and obsessed with the D. Does this empowered woman look feminine? Well, she's holding a gun, and I've got news for you. Guns are penises. She's smoking a cigarette, and cigarettes are penises. She's wearing high heels, and high heels are penises. That slit in her dress that shows off her long legs? It's a bit second-wavy, and not completely off base. Like, I get it, Laura. Sometimes a knife is a dick, symbolically, I mean. But sometimes a stiletto is just a stiletto. I want to stress that a trope does not define a character, and does not alone make her or the movie around her bad. I love a number of the characters I've cited. But when a movie, even a great movie, tells me, don't worry, this woman is violent, but we're not saying women at large are as strong or violent as men, I feel condescended to. The lengths some movies will go to soothe my ego like I'm a 7-year-old who's going to throw his toys against the wall strike me as a big waste of time that could be better spent on the more interesting parts of a movie. I'll take another shootout any day. Imagine you're called on stage to do a cold reading of a two-person scene from a play you've never read. You don't know the story, the characters, or even the stage directions, and the director hands out only one script to the other actor. You will have to improvise all your lines. The other actor knows the premise, knows the story, but they still need you to make the scene work. The person who knows what happens is trying to signal everything you need to you without straying from the script, while you attempt to discover your role in the story and perform it at the same time. That is the attention that must be paid. And together, you try to make a story. This is an exercise my acting teacher used to do with us to get us listening to the other actors in a scene instead of just waiting for our cues. And this is how an adventure game feels. It was 1993, and we all knew about Doom. It had a reputation. Many of us learned it existed with the same breath that forbid us from playing it, in the same way we were forbidden from watching Beavis and Butthead or Terminator 2. We didn't have those kinds of parents. But most of us knew someone who did. We came to learn 3 things about Doom. That it was intended for grown-ups, that our access to it was scarce, and that having not played it meant getting teased by those who had. Some of us never asked if playing it interested us, we simply knew playing it was important. And when we played, and we did play on whatever computer someone had secreted the shareware version onto, it was like nothing we'd ever seen before. Amazing and terrifying, in the same way a kid alone in the house watching their first skin flick finds it shocking because half-naked women in simulated sex are so far outside their limited experience. We had never seen anything close to this, and it unsettled us at first. But we played. The titillation of an art student drawing a nude model lasts for the few moments between the dropping of the robe and the touching of charcoal to paper. Then, nakedness becomes just another series of lines to render. We acclimated. When we fired our shotguns into an enemy, soon enough all we saw was an obstacle neutralized. We saw a series of lines elegantly intersecting a series of boxes. That's not what our parents saw. Our parents saw an imp howling in pain as its ribcage burst from its chest. And so part of playing Doom became learning how to defend it. I Play Doom for the gameplay became a generation's I Read Playboy for the articles. When we got caught, we tried to explain the lines and the boxes. The bullet wounds were just there to let you know when you'd hit your target. The Space Marine's bleeding face was just there to tell at a glance how your health was doing. The enemies were satanic hellspawn just to make it perfectly clear their function was to be dispatched by your shotgun. What we wouldn't say was that all these things could be accomplished through other means, without blood, but we didn't want to play Chex Quest. What we couldn't put into words, most especially under threat of punishment, was that, while the blood and gore wasn't why we wanted to keep playing, it was usually why we sat down in the first place. Doom was good, but being good wasn't what made it important. It was important because it was illicit. Yes, we were kids, and we probably would play a game that offered us nothing but brutal violence. But if the lines didn't pleasingly intersect the boxes, we would soon stop playing. Doom is loved today because there was more to it than that. Blood was captivating, but it wasn't enough. We sat down, but we did not stay for blood alone. What our parents could rarely put into words was that us no longer seeing the blood was part of what worried them. These are some fundamentals I want you to keep in mind as we look at the right. Everybody's people. When I talk about the difference between the right and the left, I'm not saying the right does this and the left does that. I'm talking about things all humans do, and the difference between the right and the left is a matter of scale and proportion. If I say the left values data over gut feelings, or the right values family over extended community, obviously everyone values all of those things. It's a question of how they're prioritized. But small differences in our priorities can lead to dramatically different worldviews. So when I say the right does X, don't get too hung up on whether the left also sometimes does X, but try to think about how it manifests on the right versus the left and what those differences between them mean. People vote their beliefs, not their self-interest. The left tends to ask things like, why would working-class voters who depend on Obamacare vote for the party that wants to repeal Obamacare? They must have been lied to. And I won't deny that a lot of lies were involved, but it's a mistake to think that people only vote for what's good for them. It seems like this should be obvious. I mean, why do I vote to have my taxes raised to pay for someone else's education, someone else's food stamps? We tend to answer that by arguing it is in my self-interest that a well-fed and well-educated population leads to a stronger economy and a richer culture, and that this will trickle down to make my life better in the long run. And I could make that case, but really, that's not why I do it. I believe in education. I believe in fighting poverty. And if you prove to me that neither would ever benefit me personally, I would still fight for them because it's the right thing to do. So when someone across the political spectrum does something that confuses us, it may be true that they're misinformed, but we can't assume that simply correcting them will change their minds. Right or wrong, they are acting in accordance with their beliefs. They trust misinformation because it aligns with those beliefs. And if you don't understand what those beliefs are, you're going to misdiagnose the problem. Tolerance and sectarianism. A tolerant view of society is the melting pot. The idea that real America is the combination of many different walks of life, all of which are valid and deserving of the same rights. A sectarian view thinks of one walk of life, usually one's own, as the real America, and this walk of life is one society should trend towards. That America is a Christian nation, English should be the national language, or the ideal family as nuclear and heterosexual. I think it's obvious which ways the parties lean. But again, these are human traits. Everyone is balancing both these impulses every day. And I don't want us to split these into tolerant good, in-groups bad. Democrats who overcommit to the melting pot run into Karl Popper's paradox of tolerance, that if you treat every group as equally valid, including Nazis, fascists, and the Klan, you create a less tolerant society. And treating one group as a greater priority than others is logical when that group is persecuted. There is a degree to which all minority activism is defending one's family. So it's a matter of knowing when to be tolerant and when to be familial. And coalition building is all about being both at the same time. Okay, so, I'm not sure how to end this. 200k subs. Wow, I find that number very humbling. Thank you all so much. And back me on Patreon if you want to, and if you haven't already. There'll be a proper video soon. What do people usually do in these things? They do Q&As, right? People ask you, what's your favorite movie, book, game, comic, anime, musical, poem, album, joke? I've been wondering what it says about me that all my answers would be things I experienced in my 20s or even earlier. Like, is it that I don't love things the way I used to? Or is it just that the more art you experience, the harder it is to be blown away? Like something can be better than anything I've seen before, but it can't shatter the record the way it could when I was younger. But whatever, I'm not making a video essay about that. So, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, The Motion of Light and Water by Samuel R. Delany, Loom, Sandman, The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, Hedwig and the Angry Inch, A Woman is Talking to Death by Judy Grahn, a three-way tie between In the Aeroplane Over the Sea by Neutral Milk Hotel, Lincoln by They Might Be Giants, and Onomatopoeia by Johnny Five, and The Lemon Cookie Joke.